Hello and welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. Today we have myself, Dan Stevens. We have with us Lauren Dean, and we have Curtis Twellman, whose camera unfortunately isn't working, but that's okay. We've got a lot of visual aid stuff to show today. So we know a lot of people listen to this through, audio podcasts. We will try to be as descriptive as we can when we're showing some of these graphics, but we do probably recommend trying to watch this one through YouTube because we will have quite a bit of graphics we're gonna show throughout this podcast. And this is a topic that we really get a lot of questions about, whether it's at workshops, whether it's, before mentored hunts or even just through, social media or things. But we get a lot of questions about selecting proper choke tubes and proper ammunition for a variety of different situations, a variety of different, target species. And so we're going to really kind of dive into that today. And we're not going to do a really deep dive into shotguns, but we are going to use some terminology. And so we'll kind of start off with just some very basic overview of some of the terminology so you kind of understand what we're saying as we go through this. But we really want to really focus on what our philosophy is of selecting ammunition. And so I think everybody's got a little bit different philosophy, and that's what's really fun about this conversation is, do you want more pellets or do you want bigger pellets? Do you want a bigger spread? Do you want a tighter spread? And so we're going to get into the nuances of all these, because one thing that when I first really started to dive into this concept and try to understand, when I grew up, it was, hey, here's a box of shotgun shells that my dad bought. We're going quail hunting. I'm using those. I'm not even thinking about it. But when I started to think about it a little bit more, it really is like this game of almost chess. You have all these different things that you can sort of manipulate, but there's a trade-off every manipulation you make. If you use a more constricting choke, well, your pattern's going to be tighter further out, but that's going to make an up close shot much more difficult because you'll be using, a pattern that may be the size of a baseball or softball versus something the size of a pizza box. And so these trade-offs are really important to understand the relationship between when you adjust, let's say, your shot size. How does that adjust your spread? How does that adjust how many individual pellets are inside of that shell? And so that's what we're really going to talk about today. But first, I want to throw it over to Curtis really quick because we're going to talk about shot type first. And so that is basically what is the material of the individual pellets made up of. And historically, lead has been the most common for a long time in a lot of situations. But recently, we have started to see a pretty big shift, and we're starting to see more and more states and individual sites restricting the use of lead shot. So Curtis, can you talk about kind of lead shot ammunition a little bit and kind of why we're starting to see, some of this change that waterfowl hunters, again, have been using for decades now?
Yeah, so like you said, it's been a long time for waterfowl. I'd have to look up the exact date. I think it's in
early 90s. Oh, is it that early?
Yeah, it was somewhere between what we said, I think. You might be closer to being right, but anyway, waterfowl hunters been dealing with it for a long time, and now a lot of public land is going to, lead-free or non-toxic shot. And the reason is this secondary contamination. It's the same thing that we talk about. We warn people against using rodenticide and against using any type of pesticide that can go up the food chain, because it not only goes after the animal you're trying to get after, those little mice and things that are in your garage, but then also the foxes and the owls and everything, the snakes, everything that might eat those mice, which can be a bummer. And same thing with the lead is birds of prey, especially. We see this a lot of times with bald eagles, which of course that's our national symbol. That's a big bird. It's something that's very it's bad optics, I guess, when you see a bald eagle that's dying at the side of the road. It goes to the rehab center, and then it's lead exposure a lot of times with those bird of prey. So definitely a concern, and I don't want to place all the blame on hunters. I know that hunters do get all the blame, but hey, anglers, looking at you too. And I'm guilty myself. I'm a fisherman. And guess what? A lot of my tackle is lead. I do try to switch over to non-lead when I can, but it is quite a bit more expensive. And
hard to find too.
Yeah, it can be really hard to find, but same thing with fishing tackle. Think of all the people that are losing sinkers and all that stuff. And birds, by nature, they don't have teeth. Remember, that's they've lost their teeth. So to chew up their food, they need grit. They're used to eating small pebbles, basically things that look just like shot. So they almost seek those things out and eat them to help them chew up their food. And of course, lead it doesn't take too much to be lethal or to make you very sick. And in the wild, if you're sick, you're dead. There's nobody to take care of you. So there are those issues. And then on top of that, there's also the issue of you ingesting the meat, right? Most of us are bird hunting because we want to eat that animal. We want to eat. We've got our orange duck in the back of our mind when we're shooting that duck. So we don't want there to be lead fragments in that duck when we're eating it that we're slowly accumulating throughout our life. We've all probably heard of the Mad Hatter from the Alice in Wonderland, right? Well, basically, hatters went mad because of exposure to heavy metals, and that same thing can happen to you if you were to eat a lot of animals that were shot with lead shot throughout your whole life. So definitely something that I try to be cognizant of and use non-toxic shot personally. Not just for the environmental impact, but also for the impact of my own environment, my own body, and my own family, because that's important too. So all that stuff is in favor of non-toxic shot, and the only drawback is that it's more expensive, really, because you can find a non-toxic shot that performs just like lead. There's non-toxic shot options that are actually more dense than lead. They can be, hopped up with a lot of powder, shot with really high velocities, and more dense than lead, so they hold their lethality a far distance out there. The problem is you got to pay for them. Some of them are $2.50, $3 per shell, and you got to be willing to pay that. And like Dan said, everything's a trade-off, right?
Yep. And that's the interesting thing, especially with the recent development of some of these new alloys that you're seeing. Historically, when people said non-toxic shot, it was steel shot, especially when the waterfowl hunters first had to really make that big switch. Steel shot was pretty much the only thing that was available readily on the market. And it does, like you said, Curtis, it has some big trade-offs. One of the biggest ones is it's not near as dense as lead. Lead is a very dense metal, which is why we use it for sinkers and for shotgun pellets. It's a very dense, and it's also pretty malleable. And so when you're using a lead versus steel, and let's say you're using the exact same shot size. And so when I say shot size, what I'm referring to is the actual size of the individual BBs inside of that shell. If you were to use a steel shot 6 and compare it to a lead shot number 6, they're going to perform drastically different. Even though the size of those BBs is going to be the same, the density is going to be different, the malleability is going to be different, and so it is going to perform pretty differently. And so what you'll see a lot of people do, and it's kind of a really easy rule of thumb for just this comparison between steel shot and lead shot, is to drop down or to go up 2 shot sizes between lead and steel. So 2 sizes larger. So if you're shooting, lead 7.5, maybe shoot a steel shot number 5, and you can expect a very similar performance. Now, your pattern is going to be a little bit differently because, like we talked about a second ago, when you adjust that shot size, you can only hold so many BBs inside of an individual shell. So as you increase your shot size, you are losing out on the number of individual pellets. And so this is where this trade-off becomes very important. But one thing I want to just kind of say right up front before we get too far in this conversation is this is the importance of patterning your shotgun and testing out different loads, testing out different choke tube scenarios at different distances, so you can actually see how that shotgun shell through your shotgun, through the choke tube that you plan on hunting with, is performing. Typically, you can Google and you'll find some pretty general comparisons, but I find it so much better to just do it yourself. So if you can find a place to pattern and try a bunch of different shot sizes and shot types, I think that's probably the best bet. But again, steel is by far the most common substitute. It's the cheapest, and it's also usually the most readily available. Again, we've seen a lot of new alloys on the market, whether it's a bismuth in tin, whether it's a tungsten, which the nice thing about some of these alloys is they perform quite a bit better than steel, and they're a lot more similar to lead, and even in some cases can outperform lead like it's nobody's business. But again, I think it's very important to pattern your shotgun with the specific shells you're using. Now, one thing I do want to mention just right up front too is not every shotgun can shoot steel, particularly if it's an older shotgun. It may not be rated for steel shot. So I know we all read through the manuals that come with the shotgun we purchase, right? We all read through it cover to cover. Please do so, because there is a lot of really important information in those manuals, some of which is stuff like this, where can it run steel shot? Do you have to use special choke tubes for steel shot? Please read through your manuals.
Yeah, guns are like the one thing, if you're going to read a manual, look at, especially if you're going to be using non-OEM original equipment manufacturer choke tubes. That's like, you need to be really careful to make sure it works. And also tungsten is harder than steel. So I was talking to my husband about this. We always talk about like, be careful with steel, like be very careful with tungsten too. Because if it can't do steel, it probably can't do tungsten either. So be sure. We usually talk about steel because that's what people are going to buy because it's cheaper. But be aware that it's harder. Bismuth is going to be softer, so it's not as much of a concern. But just definitely make sure you read through and do some research before you go, especially with older guns. So
yeah, and since you're bringing up kind of the hardness factor, also if you're making a switch from using lead to steel, be very careful when you start eating that wild game. Again, lead is fairly malleable. You don't want to eat it. Obviously, you don't want to get a pellet in your mouth. But if you end up biting down on a BB of steel or tungsten, you might break a tooth. So be extra diligent when you're going through and checking that meat, because again, these are very hard metals, and you can have a pretty big dental bill just from missing one of those individual BBs. But Curtis, what's kind of your?
Go ahead. Elaborate a little. So my dad, a collector of old guns, so I'm well schooled in this, and basically, so a lot of guns are going to predate manual. So some people might be saying, "Hey, I inherited a gun. There is no manual." If you don't have a screw-in choke tube, then you have what's called a fixed choke tube. That gun was basically made before steel shot was a thing. It was not even a consideration. So those barrels are made where they're softer than the steel shot that's being shot through them. If you're shooting a gun and it has screw-in choke tubes that you can change, there's a good chance that that's rated for every shot that's available there. You still need to pay attention to what choke tube you have in there, and most of them you can screw out and they'll stay on it. If not, you can measure them and tell. There's actually a nifty little trick with a dime that you can tell what it is. A dime for a 12 gauge will not fit in full choke. It'll fit exactly in modified choke, and there'll be a little bit of gap in improved cylinder. So if it's rubbed off and you can't tell, you can kind of check it quickly with a dime. But if it has screw-in choke tubes, you're probably good. Just go with a more open choke. Those older guns, they pattern them to pattern pretty full. So most of them have a fuller choke tube. They have really soft barrels. And then especially if you get to side-by-sides or over-unders, they made the barrels as thin as possible to save on weight. So those have a big time issue where if you shoot hard shot like tungsten or steel through them, they can split. So there are people that do it. They reload their own shells, or they buy special shells loaded with bismuth and they load them way down so they're not nearly as hot. Because that's the big thing, is our shells now are loaded so hot. We've got the polymer plastic casing that takes up so much room in the barrel. These older shells burned with slow burning powder, way less muzzle velocity, and then they had paper or fiber wadding, so it took up less space in the barrel. All these things made it where it was much more forgiving to shoot back in those days. Yeah. So heirlooms, definitely research and talk to your gunsmith before shooting, and be more careful. And then if you've got something old enough to have like a Damascus barrel, hang it on the wall. You're probably not shooting any modern shells out of
that. Good point. And another kind of common alloy I want to bring up is this term heavy shot. It's something you'll see a lot of waterfowl hunters have started to really use. And it's essentially a combination of, I think it's tungsten, nickel, and iron. But the nice thing is it's even more dense than lead. And so it gives you a higher pellet count than lead shots do, but also allows it to be shot with very high velocities. And so, like Curtis said, that's one thing you run into with some of these older shotguns is they just can't handle the velocity that these shells are now operating under, where this heavy shot is even another step above that. So heavy shot is great for really reaching out there, especially if you're doing some waterfowl hunting and you're taking, shots at big ducks or geese that are far, that aren't necessarily, flying into your setup. Heavy shot is definitely worth looking into. It is extremely pricey. I will say that. I don't personally have a ton of experience with it. It's just not something I readily afford. $40 a box is quite a bit for me. I much prefer, steel shot for me. But Curtis, do you have kind of a preference when I know you're a big waterfowl hunter. Do you typically stick with the normal steel, or do you go to one of these kind of more modern alloys?
Yeah, and this has changed for me because in college, and of course, broke college student, I would go with the cheapest, the expert steel shot. And I just kind of thought, well, I could always buy more. But I guess, and it's really my duck hunting friend from Alaska that's helped me to turn around and say, like, man, we put so much effort and time into duck hunting, right? We're putting all this effort in to get to our spot, putting out our decoys, not to mention how much money have you spent on decoys, rigging them up, So when you put all that into perspective, especially if you're much more effective with better shot, and I feel like I am. So I have started to opt for the better shot. Now, I don't always get heavy shot, which is probably top of the line, but they also sell, I think it's called heavy metal, which is a mixture of some heavy shot and some steel. It's kind of a mid price point. So a little bit of the best of both worlds there. Sometimes I get that, but I definitely do these days put a lot more money into the non-toxic shot, and I prefer to get non-steel options. And it's just like my buddy Kyle says, we're putting so much time and effort into getting these ducks in our face that when it happens, we don't want to miss, and we don't want to cripple ducks. And yeah, it sucks to buy a $40 or $50 box of shells, but you know what? I might just get 6 ducks with 9 or 10
sure.
As opposed to, I've had times, and I'm not joking, on windy days where cheap steel shot, I absolutely felt like I was shooting blanks, and the people I was hunting with were just because the steel shot, it's I feel like in heavy winds and ducks, the feathers, if you're at 20 yards plus heavy winds, man, that cheap steel shot, you might as well be throwing feathers at them. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I read a comparison that it was sort of like, think about some of it with steel as almost being like a ping pong ball compared to like a golf ball. Like just with the density, like it's just so much lighter. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I explain it in our workshops is I think about, grab a wiffle ball and a baseball.
Yeah, same type of concept. Like it's just
your buddy, and which one's going to hurt worse, Probably the baseball slower is going to hurt worse than the wiffle ball faster, but yeah, so I will go for the better shot these days, definitely, and I try to stay away from the cheap steel shot. For something like doves, or, if I feel like I'm going to have a ton of opportunities and I can wait for shots that are really close and good shots, sure, cheap steel shot all day for doves, no problem with that. But when it comes to ducks or geese, something that takes more effort to get them in your face, I want to know when I pull the trigger, the job's going to be done,
Sure.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I was like, what do you do that for doves? But it makes, like, it's a smaller bird. You've got usually more options. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's like me. I mean, I do quite a bit of waterfowl hunting, but most of my shotgun hunting is small game or upland birds. And so for me, steel shot is my number one. But I was actually looking at some of my pictures from earlier last hunting season when Curtis was talking. It looks like I actually did. I took you on an early season goose hunt. Was it last September, Lauren? Mm-hmm. And it looks like I actually did use heavy shot on my 10 gauge then. And I don't think we missed a single bird that day. I think every bird that we shot at and came into range left with us. So
we did well. That was a fun hunt. I hope we can do that again. I talked to Reed.
Yeah, any day you get a couple bands early season and one of them happens to be from Canada, it's a good day.
It was just fun. Like we didn't think that hunt was going to be worth anything either, and it was good. It was fun.
That's the best part about an early season goose hunt like that is
And
It
we're
could be
helping out the
so hit or miss.
landowner because she just wanted them
Yep.
gone. Like, oh, that was
Yep.
great.
Nice. So yeah, so moving right along, I mean, obviously we've talked quite a bit about the individual pellets, what metal those are made up of. Another big thing to talk about is the overall length of the shotgun shell. Now, the nice thing about the length of the shotgun shell, you don't have a ton of flexibility there. A lot of it's going to be dependent on the specific firearm that you're using. If you are completely unfamiliar, please look at your manual. It'll tell you which length shotgun shells it can accept. If you can't find that manual, 100% of the shotguns I've interacted with will have it stamped on the side of the barrel right next to the gauge. So definitely check that. Again, I don't want to say every shotgun that was ever made will have that stamped there, but everyone that I've personally held or interacted with, and it's been a lot of them, will have it stamped there. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you can usually go smaller. So let's say you have a chamber that's a 3.5-inch chamber, meaning you can put a 3.5-inch shell in that chamber. That also means you can use a 3-inch shell. That also means you can use a 2 3/4-inch shell. If it's just a 3-inch chamber, that means you can use a 3-inch shell or a 2 3/4-inch shell, but obviously not that 3.5. And where that 3.5 can be really advantageous is for some of your bigger birds, whether it's turkey can be really productive with that extra 1/2 inch of powder. Adds a lot of speed, a lot of velocity, and really allows you to get that pattern out to a pretty good distance, as well as big geese. It's great for big geese. But one thing I do want to mention, because it was when I first discovered this, I was like, well, that doesn't make a ton of sense. But then you think about it, it really does. If you were to pick up a 2 3/4-inch shotgun shell out of a box, grab a ruler and measure it, it will not measure at 2 3/4 inches. So what that measurement actually is after that shotgun shell has been fired. So once that shotgun shell fires, it's going to flare out, open up the end just a little bit, and it'll give you that extra length, which will then be the true length of that shell. So if you find a bunch of shells laying on the ground, you start measuring, you're not going to be like, oh, why is that not 2 3/4? Because it won't be. But for me, a lot of it really depends on what I'm hunting, and more importantly, where I'm hunting. If I'm upland hunting, I'm very commonly just using a 3-inch shell. If I'm practicing at the range, it's 2 3/4-inch shells all day for me. That saves your shoulder a little bit, a lot less recoil, plenty effective for breaking play targets. Still plenty effective for squirrels, for pheasants, quail, even dove in that case. But normally if I'm hunting, I like to use a 3-inch shell just to give me a little bit extra powder, a little bit more oomph when those pellets interact with the target. And then for me, the only time I'm using a 3.5-inch shell is for turkey or for big geese.
And I want to say too, that's one of the reasons the shotgun my husband likes to use for turkey. Like that's why he likes it. It's because it can accept that 3.5-inch shell. Like that's
and the nice thing is you don't have to, when I first started getting the shotguns, it's like, 3.5-inch. Oh, I'm probably gonna have to buy one of these shotguns that's like $2,000. You can get I actually own a Remington 870, which is about as bare bones of a shotgun as you can get. You can use it as a boat paddle. You can drop it in the mud. It's still going to shoot. It's still going to function. But I have the Remington 870. I think it's called the Magnum Express or something, but that actually does accept the 3.5-inch shell. So you don't have to get one of these very high-end shotguns just to be able to accept a 3.5-inch shell. Some of the more budget and affordable models can run a 3.5-inch.
Yeah, ours it's the Benelli Nova, so it's not the cheapest thing ever, but it's definitely not the most expensive.
I've heard a lot of good things about the Novas, and I've shot one or two of them. They're pretty good shotguns. I like them.
Yeah, we're very much a value for quality gun household. We're not going to be like, we're very much like okay, it's nice, but is it like worth that extra $300? You know what I mean? Like we go for,
yep.
And can I drop it and it'll be all right, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
And I will say on the other side of both what you all were saying, I hate 3.5-inch guns. I hate them. I only ever had one in my life, so maybe I shouldn't base it on that one, but it patterned horribly. Trying to force way too much shot out of the barrel with it only patterned okay with very open choke tubes, and I'm like, why the heck would I ever need an open choke tube and 3.5-inch? So I won't even say what it is, because I guess I don't want to give it negative publicity, because maybe I just got a lemon. But now with the better shot, you see a lot of people going down So instead of going up, like a lot of people, hey, I could shoot 3-inch shells, but now I'm shooting better shells and I'm shooting 2 3/4 and they function better than the 3-inch steel. So I definitely go that way. I don't like the 3.5s, especially in pump guns, because I'm so used to the throw of a 3-inch gun. That's what I've been shooting my whole life. My Remington is an 870 Express, which is 3-inch or 2 3/4. That when I do pick up somebody's 3.5, I jam it. Because the throw is a little different, which throws me off, and that's my own personal thing. But to me, it's a much cleaner throw in a 3-inch gun, and that's what I prefer, especially with the good shot types that are out there now. I'm like, why do you need 3.5?
Sure, and I mean, just picking back on that a little bit too. I mean, these modern shells are so good that you're even seeing a lot of turkey hunters switch. I mean, Illinois just legalized to be able to use a 410 for turkey. 10 years, 10, 15 years ago, that would have been absolutely unheard of. But the technology in these shells is so good that it allows you to get away with that. It's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different philosophy. It used to be like, let's get the biggest thing possible and
let's
try to
blow your shoulder.
And now it's, hey, we could be efficient. And we can
carry a much lighter firearm. That's the one thing about all my shotguns that can accept 3.5-inch shells. They are heavy. They are big shotguns.
Oh, yeah. I'm not using that Nova. That thing is 8 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's also extremely long. So I'm only 5'2". Sure. So that thing, I feel like it's as big as I am. And like I'm tipping forward. Like that's not what I'm using. Let's put it that way. And even with him schlepping it around for turkey hunting, he prefers the Mossberg for a lot of things because it's just easier to carry. Like it's just, you're going to be schlepping all day. It's not the one you want to
reason. Don't feel like you got to go with the 3.5. Just 3-inch guns. That's all I've got in my house. That's all you need for anything. If 3.5 makes you feel better, I guess go for it. But
like I said, that was just that's not the reason he got that gun, but it is a thing that he wanted me to mention. He's like, if it comes up, just throw it up there as a pro.
Again, for me, I'll use 3.5-inch. Again, very specific scenarios. It's if I'm turkey hunting and I'm expecting a 40 or 50-yard shot. Historically, every turkey I've shot at has been under 20 or 25 yards, so it hasn't really been a huge need case. But yeah, everybody's got a little different opinion. But we'll move right along to choke tubes. I think this is where we'll get a little bit more discussion too, because I'm very much of the opinion I don't personally do a lot of choke tube changing. There are some people that you'll interact with at a sporting clays course who will literally every station they're changing their choke tubes. Personally, I'm not that way because for me, I'm a hunter, right? And so I want to make things as simple as possible. And so we'll start off with just kind of an overview of choke tubes, and then I'll tell you what I typically have in my gun 95% of the time. But if you're unfamiliar with choke tubes, so essentially you can view it like putting your thumb over a garden hose. All it's doing is slightly constricting the end of that muzzle. It's so slightly that you wouldn't be able to just look at it and tell the difference. But what that does is it changes your shot string from spreading this far at 30 yards to, if you use a more open choke, now it's going to spread this much. And that's the trade-off that we were talking about when we first kind of started this episode is you want good pellet density to ensure you're either breaking that target or harvesting that bird if that's what you're hunting for. But you also want to have a big enough spread that you're not trying to aim basically a single projectile at that individual target. If you have a full choke in, which is about as constricted as you can get, and you have a pheasant flush at 5 or 10 yards, you're basically trying to shoot it with a bullet because that pattern is going to be so tight at that point that it's going to be darn near impossible to actually hit it. And if you do, there's probably not going to be a lot of meat left. And so these are the trade-offs you have to think about. Yeah, you can always run a full choke, and that allows you to shoot way across the other side of the field. But is that where most of your shots are going to be for that specific day? So we typically have, I like to just view kind of 4 choke tube types. There's a lot of intermittent steps between each, but we'll start off with cylinder choke. This is basically your most open. It can also be called, you'll hear people use skeet choke, which is a little bit more open than cylinder. But these are primarily what people are using when you're expecting very close shots. So when you're expecting something kind of 25 yards and in, a cylinder or open choke is quite productive for that. The next step is the improved cylinder. This is my bread and butter. This is pretty much where I keep my shotgun. 95% of my hunting is rocking an improved cylinder. And again, that's just because I have shot with this choke tube for so long that my lead and everything just happens a lot more natural with this. And it just feels like I'm very competent myself shooting an improved cylinder. And so for me, I pretty much never take improved cylinder out of my shotgun. As you get a little bit more constricted, you can use a modified, which again gets you a little bit more range. And then you have a full choke, which is almost full constriction. You're really putting that pattern density out to a pretty good distance. And then we have some specialized choke tubes like the extra full, which a lot of people call a turkey choke tube. And really, we're only using that in very specific niche cases like a turkey choke. But before we move on, one thing I do want to clarify and kind of re-mention, like Curtis was talking about when we were talking about steel shot, please make sure that your choke tube is rated for steel or some of these other alloys if you're not going to be running lead. It will be marked very clearly on the individual choke tube. And if you've never purchased choke tubes before, keep in mind that they are usually firearms specific.
Yes, they don't all have the
every
same
manufacturer has their own proprietary threads, which drives me up the wall.
Yes.
So if you buy a Browning choke tube, it won't fit your Remington gun. Now, normally, when you go to a store, there's going to be a box that says Remington, and on the back it'll say this choke fits Remington 870, fits 11, and it'll list all the different models that it will specifically fit. But that's why I like to very, very commonly recommend purchasing a firearm that's pretty common on the marketplace. I have a couple Browning shotguns that I inherited. I cannot go to the store and buy a choke tube for those. I have to order those online. My Remington 870, I can buy a choke tube at Walmart, at Farm and Fleet, at Rural King, at Bass Pro. Literally walk in, same day, walk out with a choke tube that'll function in that specific shotgun. So just kind of keep that in mind. But what's your go-to choke, Curtis? Are you one that's kind of constantly changing to fit the scenario, or you kind of just leave it and forget it?
Yeah, I mean, for waterfowl, modified is 95% of what I go for. With my Remington 870, which it's especially with non-toxic shot, it probably performs more like improved modified or full, and so yeah, I will keep that in all the time for waterfowl. But then if I'm dove hunting or hunting upland game or even shooting clay birds, then definitely go to probably the improved cylinder or something like that. And then for turkey, going to the extra full generally. Give me a little bit more yards, but I like the way the British terminology for choke tubes, because it's easier to remember than ours, because if you've ever heard the way the British call them, so there's open choke and then full choke, and then they call modified half choke, improved cylinders quarter choke, and then improved modified is 3/4 choke. So it's kind of an easy way to remember that just basically as you increase the choke, you're increasing your range, you're increasing the restriction. Easy way to think about that. But for me, half choke modified is what I'm rocking 95% of the hunting time.
Nice.
We usually have improved in ours. That's usually the default. The exception is Jacob with his CZ Drake, because it's got the 2 barrels. He'll usually have, he has improved in one, and then he'll put the modified in the other, just because he could switch which one he wants to do. So like for a situation where it's like, oh, a bird flushes, and then if I miss it kind of thing, which is kind of a nice thing if you've got, side by side or an over under, you kind of can play with that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a big advantage of those guns. I personally don't own a double barrel shotgun on mine, or either pump. I have a single shot break action and then a couple semi-automatics. So I don't get to play around with using 2 chokes. But I was at a sporting place course a couple weeks ago, and there was a lot of people, and just understanding their philosophy, who basically just what you said. They'll have a more open as their first barrel. Their second barrel will be a little bit more constricted. So maybe that pheasant flushes, boom, they take the first shot. Oh, missed, it's still flying. Well, now it's 5 or 10 yards further. Boom. Now they can hit it with that next shot with their choke tube that's a little bit more constricted. So it does add a little bit more creativity and a little bit more, nuance to it to be able to have the 2 barrels. But one thing I do want to mention right up front that I kind of forgot to, if you are putting in a choke tube, do not over tighten it. A lot of people, when they put in that choke tube, they want to tighten it as hard as they can. Don't do that. All you're going to end up doing is fusing that choke tube, and you may never get it out again. I do recommend buying, they sell, it's called choke tube grease, essentially. Any store you go buy a choke tube, you'll see a can or a bottle of choke tube grease right there. I run all my choke tubes with grease just that way. Whenever I want to back it out and take it off and change it, I can. Because I do have an 870 that I grew up hunting with that I never did that with. And that choke tube is in there forever now. So that barrel has become a fixed choke improved cylinder barrel. So highly recommend using choke grease on your choke tubes. And again, don't over tighten them. Just get it hand tight, and that's plenty. You don't need to really crank it down with a pneumatic drill or anything like that. But I think Curtis brought up a really good point too. You know, we're talking about choke tubes and a little bit of the trade-offs between the two. Well, another big one, like Curtis said, is depending on the individual shot type that you're using. Steel shot through an improved cylinder is going to perform vastly different than lead through an improved cylinder. And so my improved cylinder happens to be rated for steel shot. And so that's kind of why I like it, because I get to use it for, you know, if I'm bird hunting, it's really a modified, because I'm pretty much 90% of the time using steel shot for me, whether I'm pheasant hunting, dove, anything. I'm pretty much always rocking non-toxic. And so it almost becomes a modified. But keep that in mind, if you're practicing a lot with lead and then you're going to switch to use steel shot to hunt, it's going to be different. So definitely make sure you're trying to practice with the loads that you're hunting with as much as you can.
Yeah, I think that's just our big tip in general is just practicing in general is good, but like make sure you also practice with what you're actually going to be using, even if it's a little bit expensive, because sometimes guns, sometimes I swear like cars with personalities, like sometimes they just don't like a certain thing or just don't.
And that is so true. My inertia driven semi-automatic, which means it essentially uses the explosion from the shotgun shell to cycle the action, to eject a shell, and to load a new one. I cannot use target loads or light loads in that shotgun. It will just not work. I'll be able to shoot one shot, and then I'm going to have to manually eject and load the next shell because it just doesn't have enough power. And you wouldn't be able to figure that out if you're not practicing with the specific ammunition, because there's even some, you know, very light like dove loads and things that I can't run through that shotgun just because it's not enough power and energy. So really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would never like go to a clay range and shoot bismuth or anything like
that. Right.
That would be silly, but I would certainly pattern it.
Yes.
Definitely pattern it with each of your choke tubes. You know, to know how it patterns. Don't just assume that because it's an expensive shell that it must just inherently be better. You might have to dial in your choke in or out depending on just how it functions in your gun. So definitely take your shots.
Yeah, patterning is so important for shotguns, and we get a lot of questions. And I wish there was that we had a better answer about where to pattern shotguns. That can be quite difficult to find locations in the States. I mean, I was a private member of a range here in Central Illinois for a few years, and even there, I couldn't technically pattern a shotgun. I could shoot a shotgun with deer slugs all day. I could shoot at targets in the air, but they did not like, no shooting, you know, horizontal to the ground. So I wish we had a better answer for that. But the best thing I could say is just keep asking people.
I just got the answer.
Did you? Let's hear it.
All you got to have is a target suspended by a drone.
Hey.
I'm just thinking we retire and set up shop, just patterning. That's what we're going to do.
You might go through a lot of drones, but
yeah. Oh, it's funny. Yeah. But yes, if you can find a spot to pattern it, please do so. And so many of us, you know, I'm guilty of this. I really these days just pattern before turkey season, and I know how my shotgun's going to perform. I use the same shells every year, but I still do it to make sure I'm still a competent shot. But definitely do it if you get a new shotgun. Do it with that shotgun, with those chokes, with a couple different types of shotgun shell type, shot sizes, velocity, everything, and just see what works best with your specific shotgun and your use case. Because we're all hunting different, right? Even though we may both be hunting pheasants, if somebody's hunting with a pointer, where I'm hunting over a golden retriever, which is a flusher, I'm probably going to use a different setup than that person who's hunting over a pointer, because they're going to have a lot more control over when that bird is going to flush. And chances are they're going to get a lot more close shots, where me, it's going to be very much I'm just walking, all of a sudden, rooster kicks off 20 yards away, and I have to make it very quick. It's already getting away from me. And so just little things like that, the style that you hunt with can really impact these things too. But yeah, so one thing we kind of wanted to start wrapping up this episode under a nice kind of bow is to just go through a couple different species and talk about what we typically use, um, how we like that, because again, everybody has a unique preference. So we'll start off first with just kind of upland game. Maybe Curtis, if you want to take a stab at what you typically rock for let's just say a standard pheasant hunt.
Yeah, so I'm generally thinking of very close shots, which is not always the case, but seems like more often than not, pheasant springs straight up, and then it just seems like a basketball sitting up in the air for what seems like 10 minutes when you're used to
So
like
slow.
doves and teal and everything. It's like pheasant is the biggest like confidence builder. So I'm probably rocking the most open choke possible, improved cylinder. And just primarily for food safety concerns, I'm going to use non-toxic shot. But when it comes to pheasants, I'm in the same mentality I am when it comes to doves, where my shots are probably going to be so easy that I'm okay with going with cheap steel because, like I said, it's shooting a basketball that's sitting still 20 yards in front of you. Not quite, but that's kind of what it seems like after shooting doves or something more challenging. So that's my philosophy, probably cheaper, non-toxic shells and prepared for very short shots.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that sounds, about what we've done as well. And I will say I'm so fast usually to react with wing shooting clinics, like pheasants. I'm like, you have so long. Like
You almost have to let them get out there, especially if
you have to let them get up. Yeah. So it's like you have time. Like, and especially you're like, is it gonna flush? Is like once it flushes, you're like, oh, okay, we're good now. Like you're good.
It's that build up. Yeah.
Once that first one goes, you're like, okay, we're good.
And
now.
I'm pretty much the same. For me, a little bit depends on if I'm hunting wild birds or some of the controlled pheasant hunts. So I've done some of the controlled pheasant hunts with even my flushing dog, where it very much becomes almost a pointing situation where you really have to force that bird to get in the air. But then I've hunted, some wild birds where they're flushing really far out. And so typically I'll bring like a number 6 shot steel in just a standard 2 3/4 inch shell. And I'm typically rocking improved cylinder. Occasionally, I might bring a few number 5 shots along just in case for some. Again, that's only in a wild bird scenario. If I'm just in an area and they just keep wild flushing way out in front of me, and I want to see if I can get a little bit more distance in there. But typically, I'm rocking number 6 steel with an improved cylinder, and many pheasants don't escape.
And I feel like a pheasant does escape. Like we had one when we did our torches and thing. It like flew off and like flew into a power line. Like it didn't die. It just bounced off and kept going. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's yeah.
And I'm pretty much using the exact same thing for quail. Only I'll use a much smaller shot size. So for quail, I may step down to like a 7.5. And again, that's not necessarily to get a smaller BB. For me with quail, I want more individual pellets. They're a pretty small target, and they're a lot more flighty than a pheasant typically is. And so I like to have a little bit more pattern and a little bit more spread out. So I use, a 7.5 shot, just again, give me a lot more pellets than I would if I was using shot 5 or shot 6, like I might for pheasant.
Yeah. And I guess I will point out that if I do have the very open choke improved cylinder probably for upland, but I will bring modified along for sure. For if it's like you say, Dan, sometimes you have those times where you just can't get close and everything seems to be jumping out there. It's already 30 yards away. Then I'm definitely going to be putting in that modified on the fly. And one nice thing about 12 gauge, at least rim chokes, if you have anything that takes rim chokes, you can change them with a quarter. Quarter works perfectly to fit in there and swap them out in the field. So you don't need your wrench.
Yeah. And if you do have a wrench,
make sure
that you keep in your bag, bring the chokes too. It's not helpful if you only bring one and not the other. It's not helpful to bring the chokes and don't have a way to put it in. Just throw that out there. Like it seems obvious, but early in the morning,
make sure that your shotgun's completely unloaded. I know, again, that seems stupid to have to say, but there are many stories each year where somebody goes to fiddle with the choke tube on a loaded shotgun. So make sure that thing is completely unloaded, action open, and then you can take that choke out, replace it.
Yes. Be safe.
Yeah. And we talked about waterfowl a little bit. We can go over setups there. For me, I'm very Again, I don't do a lot of duck hunting, especially just where we live. We don't have a ton of opportunity. So typically, I'm rocking a number 2 to number 4 shot size that seems to work out well for me. And again, I'm typically using an improved mod choke, which running this non-toxic probably turns that improved cylinder more into a modified, so it gives me a little bit more tighter pattern without even having to change that choke tube. How about you for waterfowl, Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite's probably in the range of like 3 to 5, especially in like heavy shot or bismuth. That 5 shot is it's good, functions well. But I like up to 3s, or if I'm gonna be a lot of times where I think I might have a shot at goose, I'll just run something like 2s or 1s because it'll function pretty well on the big ducks, but then also be a good in-betweeny for geese. Because I used to bring 2 different kinds of shells, and you could swap them out and all this kind of stuff, but just in the marsh that gets confusing, and I would wind up getting confused and putting in my goose shells when I was just shooting a normal duck. So
A little teal comes in, you hit it with a goose load.
yeah, so I kind of just stopped doing that and started trying to just bring one good shell that hopefully can cover most everything that I'm hunting that day. But so yeah, big 3s, 5s, 1s, somewhere right in there is the sweet spot.
So I've only
Early season, probably using the shots that are like 5-shot, and then later in the season going up to the larger shot. It's weird because it's a smaller number, larger shot, yada yada. Brain's confused.
Yeah.
But anyway,
everything with shotguns, it's like good luck to you. Like I always have to stop and think about it because it's all like kind of
it's like gauge, right? The gauge is getting bigger. The number, like 20 gauge, is a lot smaller than 12 gauge, but the number 20 is much bigger than 12. Yeah,
just counterintuitive. I always have to stop and think about it.
And a lot of it comes back to how these terms were kind of first coined, like the term gauge. What that essentially means is how many balls of an individual diameter does it take to equal 1 pound? And all those balls need to be lead. And so if you take the circumference of a 12 gauge barrel, it takes 12 lead balls of that exact size to equal 1 pound. And so that's how they came up with 12 gauge. Where 20 gauge, it takes 20 balls of that size, so they're a little bit smaller, to equal that 1 pound. So a lot of it's how they came up with that individual term. But yes, it can be quite confusing right up front.
Yeah. For waterfowl, for me, we've only really done goose, so bigger. We used improved cylinder with my husband's 12 gauge. I think he said he used steel BB for that, and then I did 2-shot with my 20 gauge. 20 gauge. Yeah.
And that's such a good thing to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up because so many people think, 20 gauge, you can't use that on big birds. You knocked down plenty of geese that day. No, I was sitting 2 feet from you with a 10 gauge. Again, a little overkill. You killed just as many geese as I did with a 20. You don't have to just get the biggest gun or the biggest shot size. And that's kind of this whole conversation is find what works for you.
Yeah. I really like 20 gauge. I know it's like, 12 gauge is like, I feel like my impression is a lot of men will do 12 gauge, but like 20 gauge is, especially for women, I think is better. It's a little bit lighter generally. And even with the rounds, I mean, afterwards, my husband was like, "Oh, did you notice any more recoil? Because lighter gun, so potentially more recoil, especially with waterfowl type stuff." And I was like, "I was so busy hunting, I didn't focus on that." You know what I mean? Like you're not, and especially when you're
especially in that moment.
Yeah, and when you're kind of doing what you're supposed to with a shotgun, I feel like the recoil isn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like when you've got it where it's supposed to be, it's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
So I would say don't be afraid of it just because of that.
And I know a lot of really prominent upland hunters who prefer a 20 gauge.
Yeah.
You don't have to. If I were in the market to buy a shotgun these days, I would probably buy a 20 gauge just because the high qualityness of a lot of these shells. And a lot of where I'm hunting, it's not just, hey, I'm going and sitting in a spot. I'm going to be there for 5 or 6 hours. I'm moving. And so a 20 gauge gives you a such lighter firearm. It's substantially lighter. That adds up if you're walking 6 miles through dense prairie, dragging your feet through all this brush.
Our Mossberg is a 20 gauge as well, and that's what my husband ends up using when we're doing squirrel. I think that's what he ended up doing with rabbit. He doesn't use it for turkey, but for pretty much anything else where we have to move, that's what he goes for because it's a lot lighter.
Yep.
So even though it's a pump, it's still, if you're going to be schlepping that thing for quite a bit. It makes a difference.
It does. It does.
And I use a 12 gauge for most everything, but it's because it's what I
Yeah,
have,
same.
what I have had for so long. Back when I got it, like it was more important to have a 12 gauge than a 20. Now shot shells have come so far. Really, it is no drawback at all. We just talked about how a lot of people are going to 410s for turkey, which is the flip of the mentality of 30 years ago completely. So I would prefer if my 870 was a 20 gauge, to be honest with you, because it's smaller, easier to carry around. And your only drawback is, sure, you've got a few less pellets in there, but as long as you're taking good high percentage shots, I mean, who cares? Those are just the extra pellets that miss the bird anyway.
I like that.
And I feel like when I'm looking for, because like women's shotguns have a huge markup. They're so freaking expensive. So usually
anything in the outdoor field, it's marketed towards women. Yeah,
yes, but especially
50%.
guns. Like it's just like, okay, it's like add an extra like $400 at least initially. So it's like I like to look for compact or youth, and I feel like for those there seems to be a lot more 20 gauge options. I don't know if that's actually true. It just seems like the things I've looked at.
I would agree there are. Yeah.
So and they tend to be not as long. Like everything I've tried, it fits better. So, and like that Mossberg has spacers on the end, so my husband and I can both use it easily. Like for the stock, so we can make it, where I can reach it or he can reach it, and it takes almost no time to swap it out. So,
yep, I'm a big fan of 20s. Yep.
I mean, it's the all-purpose gun. If you want one firearm that you could hunt like absolutely everything in Illinois and really the Midwest with, it's a 20 gauge. It's everything.
It came with the barrel for the deer hunting too. With it, like that gun came with everything. Like
that's awesome
for like $600, maybe less than that. Like it was,
And again, if you just reasonably take care of. Firearms hold their value and they last forever. It will last well past your lifetime if it's even just. It doesn't have to be taken care of like it's a safe queen. Just every couple months, wipe down, give it some oil, give it some lube. That gun will
just
outlast.
Don't let it stay wet. That's like I feel like the main thing.
Yeah.
But this is a good time to mention like our actual cleaning schedule, which like for me. After every single hunt where there's any type of moisture possible, I am oiling it immediately after the hunt. You never let your gun sit in moisture, especially in a gun case. That is what will.
And if you put it in the gun case wet, let the case dry out. Like unzip it, let it dry. Because it's going to be wet too. Don't make it damp and moldy and nasty for next time.
Put air on it, yeah. But so that's after every hunt, and that's not taking your gun apart. That's just a wipe down and a spray down of the things you can see. But then once a year, any gun that I use, I'm going to take it apart to every single component that I can take apart, including, this is where you can look at your manual, or if you don't have a manual, they are available online. Even for old guns that don't have manuals, you can find them. There's always going to be some pins in the receiver that you can just punch out, take the whole trigger assembly out, and you can clean all that really well. I try to do that once a year with the guns I'm using. Now, if it's a gun that just sits and I shoot it like once or twice a year, then I'm probably only doing that about once every 3 or 4 years, to be honest. But I am giving it that wipe down with oil immediately after every use, especially if there's any amount of moisture possible.
And see, this is where it's another advantage of, I don't want to say a cheaper firearm, but a more affordable firearm. Like my Remington 870, I clean it basically the same schedule you just mentioned. If it's wet, I'm getting it cleaned, and then I clean it once a year. I inherited a couple Browning semi-automatics that I mentioned are inertia driven. I pretty much have to clean those after every single shot. If I don't, those tolerances are so tight in the manufacturing of that shotgun that any little buildup of gunk and anything just causes it to jam. And so those I'm pretty much cleaning every time after I use them. And again, it's just because those tolerances are so tight. But that's, again, the advantage of using some of these shotguns that aren't necessarily as high end is they're made with a lot more flexibility. Those machine tolerances are more open. And so you can run a lot dirtier than you can some of these, very, very high end tight shotguns.
Yeah, we
Those
clean.
Belgian-made A5s.
Yeah.
We
Oh yeah,
clean. We
yeah.
clean
My
pretty
dad
often.
rocks with one of those most of the time.
Does he? Yeah.
Sweet
They're
shooting
nice.
guns.
Yep.
We clean pretty often, especially because like we'll do this time of year, we'll do a wing shooting clinic, and then we might not do anything until the next one, which will be 6-8 weeks. And mine is the semi-automatic, the inertia, not the gas. So like we'll do that, clean it. And my way is mostly my husband, and I swear some of it because with the Marines, he's like, all right, take it apart and do it, and then it's good, and I don't have to worry about it.
It's cathartic to do too. It's great. You're just sitting there watching
YouTube.
football
Like
game
if you're
or a
having a
baseball game.
problem, go to YouTube because someone somewhere has probably had that same problem getting that gun apart. Like I think every single gun we've had, he's gone on YouTube at least like the first 3 times he's cleaned it to figure out how to break it apart. And don't lose the pieces.
And it's really easy. The one thing I will say, especially about shotguns, is be careful. There are some springs under tension. So like Curtis mentioned, go through that manual if you have it. And if you don't, watch a video or something ahead of time because there are some tension springs that if you're not expecting, they may.
Yeah.
I've spent some days looking on the carpet for very tiny springs.
Yeah, just lay everything out. Like just have it.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving right along, I do want to talk a little bit about squirrel setups. We push squirrel hunting quite heavily. Not only is it a great way to get started, but it's also a heck of a lot of fun. Now, for squirrels, I definitely prefer hunting with a 22 if possible. But as we know in Illinois, not every single state site allows that. Again, if I have the opportunity, I'm typically going to grab my 22 over a shotgun. But my shotgun setup is actually quite a bit different for squirrels. And again, it's because it's the way I hunt. We talked about how mobile I like to be. And for squirrels, I don't need a huge shotgun. I don't need a ton of range oftentimes. And so I have it was made in like the late 1960s, but it's a break action 410 shotgun. That's a single barrel fixed choke. So it's improved cylinder. And it's a 410. And that is by far my favorite squirrel gun. So that's pretty much what I rock. 95% of the time I'm squirrel hunting on Illinois DNR land when I can't use a 22 is that single shot 410. I love that thing.
Yeah, it sounds fun. My brother had one of those, but I do not. So I'm 22 is my preferred way to squirrel hunt, but 410. If I had one, that's what I would choose.
Yeah. And try to get headshots with squirrels. I'll say that because a lot of times you're not necessarily shooting those on the move, but if you get an opportunity to go for that clean headshot, obviously we like to do that with everything, but squirrel in particular, it's pretty easy to ruin a lot of meat with a squirrel carcass using a shotgun.
Yeah, we usually use, again, the Mossberg 20 gauge, improved cylinder, usually steel, 6-shot. Although, honestly, squirrel tends to be what we have around. Sure. When we get to certain things, it's like, what we got hanging around, like leftover,
Yep. Use up the last 4 shells in that box, the last 5 in that one. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of eating squirrel. I feel like it's such an undervalued wild game meat. When you do get young squirrels, like I just hate the idea of shooting them with a shotgun. Because the 22 is the way to go. Because I like having those nice, clean, quote buffalo wings that I can make that aren't all shattered with bone shards and everything else.
I don't know. The ones Jacob got last year, though, with the shotgun, we didn't find any pellets. Like, I don't know.
Oh, good. So he got nice, clean headshots. That helps.
Yeah, even though it was with it. So, like, he managed, like, more power to him. Worked out well.
That Marine experience is paying off. Yeah.
Yep.
His aim is on. Good. I like it. And then turkey. Turkey's, I think, kind of the last one we haven't really touched on. I don't personally have a ton of experience with a lot of the new TSS. I've certainly seen and read everything that people say on TSS and how excellent it is. I'll be honest, for me, I haven't bought turkey shells in probably 5 or 6 years because normally I'll buy a couple boxes and I'm usually maybe shooting 1 or 2 shells at most a year. I'll shoot, 2 or 3 at the range and then 1 or 2 while hunting. That's literally it. So I don't even use an entire box each year. And so I haven't made the TSS investment, and that's simply just because I haven't needed to buy shells yet. But I imagine next time I do need to buy some turkey loads, I will probably investigate the TSS a little bit more. But I prefer a nice shot 5, shot 6. I don't need anything too intense. I do typically try to find a 3.5-inch shell. But again, that's just personal preference. I like that for a turkey load. But other than that, I'm not doing anything too out of character for that. I am rocking an extra full choke. I will bring just a standard full choke along with me, just in case for some reason I feel like these birds are going to be in my lap. I can at least quickly change if need be. But every turkey I've ever shot has been with an extra full. But have you used any of the TSS, Curtis?
I haven't, but I love the idea. I mean,
Yeah.
Like you, I have a gun that works, so it's like, do I really want to invest in this? But if I was to win another gun at a banquet, I really hope it's a 410, turkey gun, because that does sound like an awesome little setup.
It does.
I'm all for it, but no, I don't have direct experience with it myself.
And so if you've never heard of TSS, essentially, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's
Tungsten
really cool.
Super Shot?
Yeah, tungsten super shot.
There you go. You got it. But it's a really high quality alloy. But a lot of times they'll actually intermix different individual shot sizes, and some of them may even have different alloys in. So you may have 2 or 3 different size BBs in that individual shell. You may have a couple different specific alloys inside that shell. And all that does is give you a little bit more flexibility with your pattern. But I've literally seen people pattern TSS. Now, I don't recommend taking a 70-yard shot at a turkey. That's just foolish. But I've seen people pattern a shotgun with TSS at 60 and 70 yards. And it's probably dense enough that it would probably kill a turkey. Like it's to me insane, the pattern density that these high-end shells can give you.
Yeah, certainly good lethality out to 35, 40 yards, which is what most people think their max, is and should be. And so I'm all for it. I would love to try it.
Yep. But they are expensive. I won't lie.
Yeah, but you don't need that many.
Yeah, that's a nice thing with turkey. You just got to kind of figure out where you're at, and then
literally, like, I have not bought turkey shells. I couldn't tell you the last time when, because I bought a couple boxes and you just don't shoot them that often.
Yeah, I say we do exactly the same stuff you do, because when we first started, my husband texted you. I think it was like, "Hey, Dan,
yeah.
what do we use for this?" So,
yep.
I did want to say,
of some like new-aged hunter going and telling their grandpa, "Hey, I'm going turkey hunting with my 410 size 9 shot," and grandpa's like, "Oh man, Junior's got the meningitis. We got to take him to the doctor. He's done flipped his lid."
Yeah, I'd asked my husband what we did for all these just to confirm, because he's the gun guy. I'm like, it makes
he's the gun guy. Yeah.
Like, go forth, know. And I'm like, wow, we use improved cylinder and steel shot for pretty much everything. Steel 6 shot basically for everything. Like, when in doubt, that's what we're doing. Like, it's what we use for rabbit. That's what we use for squirrel for the most part. It's what we mostly use for dove. Like, that's just all small things. That's what we're going for.
And it all performs just fine. And again, that's the really nice thing about this is somebody can be just as effective with an open choke as I can with an improved cylinder. They just happen to know, I need to shoot that target a little earlier. I need to acquire that target a little bit sooner. I can't take that second shot at it. So I really got to make this first one count. And so a lot of times it's just not only knowing your own personal limitations, but just the limitations of the setup you're using. And again, understanding how, you're adjusting your choke tube. What else does that impact? Okay, you're moving down a shot size. That's going to impact the number of pellets. It might impact the amount of powder in that shell. All these things, everything has a trade-off, and just understanding that relationship, you really can't make a bad decision a lot of times.
One thing that I think people overlook when it comes to flying birds is the lethality of your shot. So we always hamper on this with archery hunting, right? You're taking your one shot. You got to make sure it's a good shot. This is really important with birds too, and a lot of people take it for granted, but with ducks especially, we think about it, and I go over this when I'm hunting with new hunters. We don't want to shoot birds flying away from us if they're further than like 25 yards. And that's because if you look at the anatomy of a bird, we've already kind of mentioned this, but they've got a gizzard, which is a super dense muscular organ that basically protects all their vital organs from the back. So when you shoot at a duck or a goose from the rear, basically the only vital organs that you can penetrate out past about 30 yards is going to be the head and neck. everything else is protected by this super dense gizzard. And so I personally will not take shots on birds going away, probably at all, but only if they're really close, like within 20, 25 yards is about all you can get away with. But you got to think about that too, is that we want to bring the bird down and we want to have a good lethal shot. We don't want to be crippling birds. And especially if you don't have a dog, crippling birds is a good way to spend your just entire hunt looking for a down game that you may not find.
Very well said. Very well said.
And get your dogs if you're hunting, because a dog is definitely a conservation tool, and they'll help you find those ones that are tricky. Because even when we do everything right, sometimes, things happen, and you can have a bird that sails on you or gets into some weeds, and it can be tough. Doves especially, man, sometimes.
Oh, it is, yeah.
They're so little.
Oh, I've got doves before that I thought were in the middle of a concrete parking lot, and I was going to be able to just walk up and pick them up. And I walked out there, and it was like they disappeared into the ground.
Even squirrels, like in August, September, when that brush is still real thick, like it's been nice with my dog because he'll go right to it. But I'm just like, oh man, this is gonna suck, because you see it and you're like, all right, great, and then you just think you see where it falls, but it's like that thick stuff, and you're just like, oh no, and
And the depth perception is always different too. When you're looking at a target up here, and then you see it fall, you're like, oh yeah, I saw it on that tree, and then you walk over that tree and you're like, wait.
Where'd it go?
Was it this tree or was it that? And,
yeah, and the nice part about hunting with my spouse is one of us is like, all right, I'm looking at it. Like, it's right there. It's right
just
there.
Stay on it. Yeah.
But it's still helpful to have the dog, just because he's like, guys, you guys are dumb. It's right here. Like, and with the squirrel, too, if it happens to still be alive, he does a little shake. No coming back to life in the game bag, because
perfect.
That's a fear I have.
Always check.
I've had a goose come alive in the truck bed before. That was an experience. Never had anything in the game bag, though, but.
Yeah. I've seen somebody. Yeah, I always remind people, always check corneal reflex before you put anything in your bags. Definitely, my old buddy Jared, I've never seen somebody take off a game vest so fast as when that thing started moving on his back.
Yep, I feel like everybody knows for deer, but they kind of forget for small game. So it just makes me feel. And I'm like, a squirrel, a squirrel especially. I don't want that thing on my back. Ooh.
Nope.
Squirrels bite hard.
Yeah,
they got some teeth.
Think about what they bite through. They're biting through you is like nothing.
Yep.
Well, the only other thing I wanted to quickly chat about, we kind of hit on it quite a bit, is gauges. We've hit on it a little bit, but one thing we didn't talk about was a 16 gauge and a 28 gauge. So I do want to just kind of open up that conversation a little bit, because for me, I think a 12 and 20 are pretty ideal. Again, for me, if I was purchasing a new shotgun these days with, like we talked about for minutes here now, the advent of some of this new technology in terms of shells, I would probably go with a 20 gauge. 16 gauges are a great option too. The only challenge there is I don't see the shells as readily available as you will, let's say, a 12 or a 20 gauge. 12 and 20, I can normally go buy shells anywhere. No matter what I'm looking for, I can typically find that. 16 gauge can be a little bit more challenging to find. So definitely something to think about. But 28 gauges, they've really taken the industry by storm over the past, really decade or so. And I think a lot of it comes down, again, to this shell development that we've been talking about, because you can get really good performance out of a 28 gauge. So much so that you're seeing a lot of new programs like the Wing Shooting Clinic that IDNR runs. They're pushing a lot of 20 gauges. A lot of their new shooters are using 28 gauges. A lot of competitive shooters these days are starting to dabble in the 28 gauge. Not something I've personally hunted with. I've shot with them quite a bit, and I really love the feel of them. Those guns are super lightweight, super accurate, super productive. But again, the shells are a little bit more challenging to find than you will, let's say, a 12 and 20. So definitely something to keep in mind if you're thinking about, going to purchase a shotgun. Look at the shell availability in your area. Now, you can order shotgun shells online and have them delivered. It is a little bit more of a process since we live in the state of Illinois. You do have to register your FOID card through that person or through that store. Like, I order shells routinely from Shields in Springfield, and they just show up in my door. So historically, I uploaded my FOID card to them once. Since my FOID card is still active, I don't have to redo it every time, and I can just order ammunition through them, have it shipped directly to my house. So that is an option too. If you're brand new to this and that seems foreign to you, it can be done legally. Just definitely make sure that it's going to take some time to get your account set up, because it's not like you can just go to Amazon, order it, and have it shipped, because we do have to go through that process of uploading a FOID card and stuff like that. But
I could do that in Texas, though. I will say they would just ship it. It was crazy. The crossbow, though,
Yep.
You can't have a crossbow delivered.
Any other state except for
Yeah.
any other.
I grew up hunting Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, all those states. You could buy shells and have them delivered the next day, or you could buy them from a gas station.
And I will say, if you're going to be buying ammo in bulk, if this is like something you're going to do, you're going to save a lot of money if you do it.
Yes.
Or if like you and your partner or you and your kid are going to hunt, like, and there's pros and cons to you both using the same gauge. We've been burning through 20 gauge faster lately because my husband's CZ Drake, he wanted a banquet, is also 20 gauge, so we've been burning through that. But it is nice because then we only have to buy one. Like, 20 is fine.
Sure.
But versus having to buy 12 and 20, but keep that in mind. But I do want to say, I feel like Bass Pro Cabela seems to, like, as hunting season approaches, stuff goes out of stock fast. So
especially the very specific loads like TSS turkey, a week before season, it's probably gone.
Yeah.
Duck loads, especially heavy shot, will be gone right before season. It'll restock, but
yeah,
now. Yeah.
And it also is going to be a little bit of a process because you're still going to have to go through that FOID background check again to get your ammo. So just, if you have some time this summer, my tip is to just go and get some ammo. Dove season is coming. Teal season is coming. Canada Goose, Resident Canada Goose is coming. Like, we got some stuff coming up. So I would just, if that's something you're interested in, just start stocking up a little bit.
And the nice thing is you can really build your collection over time, because now I'm to the point where I pretty much have all the ammo that I could need for the upcoming season. But every time I go to a Bass Pro or a store, I'll grab a box or two of something to just continue to replace that stockpile, so that I don't even have to think about it anymore. So you don't have to go out right up front and spend like $1,000 to get all the ammunition you want for like the next 5 years. Just piecemeal it.
Yeah, or if you want to do squirrel or some small game, just go get some like 6. Deal 6 shot and be good to go.
Yeah, we'll say, since you mentioned the 16 gauge, that's like a vestigial caliber, because that was popular when 20 gauge was only 2 3/4, and then once 20 gauge developed a Magnum and could take 3-inch, it pretty much made the 16 gauge obsolete. So there was really that overlap, no reason to have it. So pretty much the only reason to have the 16 is if you inherit it, or if you want to be ironically cool.
I don't know. I've heard they're starting to come back, according to the gun guy I live with. Like, they're starting to
people like
it's because of that ironically cool factor. It offers you nothing over a 20.
I wouldn't be buying one, but hey.
Yeah.
It's only so you can turn your nose up and feel better than the Leons that have 20 gauges.
I'm like, I don't want to have to buy yet another kind of ammo if I don't have to.
Yeah. Especially 16 gauge ammo. That stuff's expensive because nobody wants to make it anymore because it's obsolete. Oh yeah, we already.
Yeah, they're like, stop this. Yeah.
And that brings up a whole nother point too. When you're selecting gauge, look at the cost of shells. 410 shells. I love my 410. I don't use it as much as I could because the shells are very expensive. Just to be able to go buy target loads to go shoot at the range, I will probably spend 2 or 3 times what I would on a box of 12 gauge target loads. So little things like that just to think about.
And that's just with any firearm too, especially with Illinois stuff. Just, this is, shotgun episode, but if you're thinking about the single shot, center fire, like all that, just if you're going to pick something, just make sure it's something you can actually find the ammo for.
Yep. Or get your account set up and start having it shipped to your door.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that because, like you said, Shields always has great deals. Whether it's Shields, Presley Outdoors is another big one in Illinois. Obviously, the Bass Pros and things like that, and then all the local gun stores. But if you buy in bulk, you can oftentimes find. And even if you're not doing it yourself, don't be afraid to get 2 or 3 buddies and say, "Hey, maybe we just go on a case of heavy shot together. We divvy it up. We each spend 30." And we each pay 33% of it. Boom.
There's ways to save money. You can definitely do it.
If you're the tinkering type, you can also look into reloading. It's some people have a lot of fun just out of the reloading process. You can not only wind up saving yourself money with shells, but you can also make them exactly to your specifications, which some people really like that aspect of it. So
it's always something I've wanted to get into. I just never made the investment to do it. I've always had that inkling like, oh, that would be really cool to do.
It's one of those
Never
things
done
that
it.
scares me a little bit. I'm like, I do it wrong, the whole gun blows up. Like
It's a pretty simple process, but like the investment of gear, there's a lot of equipment that's needed.
that
And
too.
yeah,
Like, does it save you money? Does it really? Like,
now that's a valid question. Absolutely.
Eventually, in the long run. I mean, like for my dad, he's had that equipment now for 50 years. So
yeah,
that money is long since forgotten about.
Right.
yeah. Well, especially if you got it, 50 years ago. Like at 50 years ago prices, you're good. But
How, speaking of reloading, since you're kind of connected to that world a little bit, how is finding supplies for that? I know there was quite a bit issue of that 2 or 3 years ago. Is that
It had
rectified?
the same issues with, yeah, for the most part. I mean, it had the same issues with people getting normal shells and cartridges.
Yeah.
I mean, there were shortages of primers, and it was just certain components that were short. And from what I understand, and I don't do it personally, but I think most of those issues have been resolved. Now, some of the prices are higher, of course, like everything, but I think you can find the stuff you need at least.
That's good. Perfect. Cool. Well, any last minute kind of words of wisdom?
Last thing I want to throw out, just because we mentioned John Browning and the Belgian A5s, obviously we're not going to dive into the history in this episode. That's a whole nother episode. But look into John Browning if you want to learn some really cool gun history, because this is like one of the gun savants of the entire world. Like he was selling his guns basically to Winchester to make money, and he started to not like the prices they were paying, went to Remington to try to sell his guns there, and the owner of Remington died in a massive heart attack while the Browning brothers were sitting there trying to sell him their guns. And that's when they decided to go to Belgium and just find somebody there to start making their guns. But super cool guy, super interesting. He's got some of the best patents ever in the firearm world.
That's true.
And he's made some of the most famous firearms in the history of the world. So really cool.
Many of which are still used as inspiration for modern stuff today. Yeah.
There's a couple.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a couple gun designers out
1911
there.
pistol, his design.
The 1911 is amazing.
I love my 1911.
I say,
handgun. Love it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
I'm not much of a handgun guy, but the 1911, there's something special about shooting that gun. It feels good
like it.
Yeah,
it's fun. I mean, shotguns are a lot more fun, I think, just to like do stuff with. Like it's a lot more engaging, but I do enjoy the 1911.
Yeah, so if that stuff interests you, definitely check out John Browning, and you'll get some kicks out of his story. He's a cool guy.
And the Remingtons
He's
are
like the
interesting
Nikola
too.
Tesla of the firearm world.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Yeah.
And the Remingtons are interesting because the wife thought she was being haunted by the ghosts of everybody killed by her husband's guns, so she made that crazy house to confuse them. There's a lot there. Like if you're interested in like crazy history, like
I forgot about that story. I need to reread that one.
Yeah. All the ghost shows go to like the Remington.
Yeah.
It might be Winchester actually.
It is Winchester, but yeah, I knew what you were going for. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot there. So
yeah. Cool. Well, awesome. Well, that's all we have for this episode. We're going to record another one, basically very similar to what we talked about today, except on the archery side. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be our next podcast that'll be released. We'll do a deep dive into archery stuff and talk about all the pros and cons of different options, different arrow types, broadheads, the whole shebang. Just trying to provide some content through the summer to get you guys ready for the fall, because it's gonna be here before you know it. I know it's hotter than snot out this week. We're rocking a heat index of like 104 here today. Pretty darn hot, but
yeah, your guys' way was even worse than up here.
Yeah, it's gross. It's gross. My allergies are all shot. Ugh.
Yeah, archery should be interesting because I know very little about it, so I'll be asking lots of questions when we do that.
I like it.
And if folks out there are interested in the history and they'd like us to do a deeper dive into the history, let us know. Let us know.
Because we love that kind of stuff. We talk about that kind of stuff all the time.
We're just not sure if you guys do.
Yeah, right. What's funny is I have a wing shooting clinic this weekend. that I'm instructing. I'm doing the safety presentation, and I take a little different approach than a lot of the other instructors. And literally, my first 15 to 20 minutes are on the history of shotguns and on shotgunning and that kind of stuff. So we love talking about it. So if that is something you're interested, yeah, like Curtis said, definitely let us know. We love to do an episode on that, and maybe we do it anyway.
We know some people. Get some guests.
Yeah.
Make it interesting.
Yep. Awesome. Well, good luck out there, everybody. If you have any questions about shotguns, feel free to reach out. We'll answer as best we can.